or anyone with any of your contact details. So Jim, over to you. And if everyone else could just mute, I think most of you are by now. Yeah, thanks.
Excellent, thank you. I hope you can all hear me. I'm going to go to the slides. I hope you can all see that. I've got quite a lot to get through, so I'll whistle through as in as timely way as I can. Thank you for the intro, Matthew. Jim Smith from a firm called Insight 6. We're up in the country. We do lots of stuff around customer experience, customer service. We're a franchise business. We've got 25 others of me. I work across Surrey and Hampshire. And Matt, we know each other, don't we? Because we've done a number of little bits of work around around some of the towns in the New Forest. But the purpose of me being here is just to give our take on some of the things that impact upon this situation that we found ourselves in. If I can make sure that my my slides move on to the next one, that would be good. I won't labour the fact that I play golf and would like to win the Ryder Cup and support a team that's won the Premier League trophy a few times, so I won't go into all that. But yeah, as we said, this has impacted us absolutely in different ways. Businesses are slowly opening, or almost opened, or fully opened. I think some businesses are still not able to open yet, but it is about how do we react. And I want us to discuss some of the factors around this that you may not necessarily have focused on, and it might shape some of your discussions over the coming weeks. Interesting to hear your introductions. Very few of the businesses, in fact, none of the businesses that you run, I think, have those sort of customers that come in and buy something and leave. There's a longevity towards the way that you operate with your customers. And by customers, I mean clients, members, patients, whoever those people are that you're serving. So that's what we mean by that. And so when it says customer at the heart of service, we want to initiate some thinking around that customer feeling. What are they feeling as a result of this? And I'm sure you'll have seen some of the stats. We've got some of ours that I'll share with you in just a moment. About thinking about your behaviour and the way that your team behave in this current thing. And we think there are three things. There's safety, which I'm sure most of you are either got to grips with or getting to grips with. Staffing, which we're finding quite a lot of businesses are not quite on the pace with that. And sometimes the customer service piece and the experience piece is getting left behind because of the obsession on safety. So let's focus on all three of those things. And as it says there, so obsession on safety is absolutely right. And I'll come to that in just a moment. And it's got to be the case. But service and doing business is often forgotten, as I've just mentioned. Businesses need turnover now. And we know that repeat business comes from great products, services, and experiences. So we've got to deliver that. And there are reasons why we've got to be good at that at the starting point. So where are we now? Well, as we just said, lockdown is opening up. Many businesses are opening up more widely, maybe with restrictions, but there's still a lot of fear out there. You may have seen the Ipsos Mori poll that this was in end of April, but the numbers are not massively different coming down. There's still a feeling of not very comfortable in doing supermarkets, shopping, even going to places of work, sending children to school, certainly going to bars and restaurants, certainly using public transport. And me being a football fan, I'm not going to a football stadium. I'm not allowed to anyway, but if I was allowed to, I wouldn't really fancy going into that type of environment. So there is this feeling that there is reticence to go out and do things amongst a big chunk of people out there. And I think we have to be wary of that. Is it that this world new normal thing is thrown out all the time? Is it new normal, old normal? We're in a new normal, whatever that will look like. What is it looking like? I mean, you'll no doubt tell me your experiences maybe later, but there's more online activity, there's less travel being done, there is this reticence. We might be finding that there's a less prosperous overall population on average, and that might have implications for the way that we do business. And we are seeing more people being driven to use online services. That certainly happened over the lockdown. Just think about the number of elderly people that now do supermarket deliveries or click and collects that never used to. They're getting used to doing those sorts of things. And maybe that's one of the things we want to try and arrest if we can. We've done some research. What are some of our researchers saying? We got nearly 1,000 researchers up and down the country, and we polled them, and a good chunk of those responded. And here's what they said. So 45% said they did not feel confident visiting local town centres. 52%, which is good news, said they intended to shop more locally, which is good. However, we did pick up that 40% are expected to shop more online. So that has implications for the business, and there are some actions. I'll come to those a little bit later on. A couple of things that the words enforce and ensure were used throughout a survey that we did, as well as distancing. So they have implications again for the way that we do business with people. So people are saying, I want things to be enforced. That has implications for your staff. And respondents said they would go shopping less often and closer to home. So that might be bad news for some of the big out of town shopping centres and industrial parks, but might be quite good for some of the local high streets and businesses in some of those. So there's a bit of a balance there. Yeah, Sandy, you might be picking up some of the financial behaviours that are coming out. You know, people are seriously cutting their cloth and saving more money, which might again go back to the point about price having an issue somewhere in the discussions that we have. So there is a sense that people are sort of reining in and doing things more locally. The stats around this sort of tell us that picture. And we did a poll of some of our southern researchers across the sort of Solent and Dorset, Hampshire, Sussex area, predominantly comfortable, as I think you picked up from the other piece, more comfortable in this area than the rest of the UK, according to Ipsos, which is very interesting. Not comfortable about visiting some of the bigger aspects, and social and public transport being a problem as well. And just before I get into the nuts and bolts, you know, we've all seen some of the winners and losers in this. Liverpool Football Club decided to furlough everybody, and then they didn't. Wetherspoons, the guy told his staff to go and find other jobs. Alan Partridge decided to furlough his gardener. Sports Direct decided to try and pass themselves off as an essential business so they could stay open. Not much of that received great press. The Grand Sapphire Hotel in Croydon has been closed, and they've done millions of meals for the NHS in one of Croydon's big Mayday hospital, and so they got some publicity out of that and some good press out of it. So, you know, there is a sense, and part of this is, you know, those of you in PR will be thinking, well, you know, are we getting a good press for this, or not, as the case may be. So as I said, three voices shouting really loudly. Voice of safety coming across loud and clear. Voice of staff, not quite as much. Voice of the client, we're going to get into a little bit. And I think if you've got a coherent approach to all three of those, then you should be in a good position. So let's look at those in turn. I think there's a hygiene factor here. You have to be safe. I said earlier on about, you know, an obsession with safety. Absolutely so. Absolutely so. I'm sure you've been introduced to all of the signage that needs to be in place, and some of the, if you've got offices or premises, then that information will be all over the place. I would guess. I live in West Wickham, between Croydon and Bromley, despite the fact I work across Surrey and Hampshire. That's fine, but we see stickers all down the road and on the lampposts, etc., etc. But it has to be safe. If people are saying to us they want enforcement, then these are the things that have to be in place And that, I think that'll be for the rest of the year probably. I'm not an expert on the safety aspects here, but we know that gov.uk has got recommendations for different types of businesses, and just simple things like, your main areas, spacing, queuing screens, entry, cleanliness, how you handle visitors, appointment only, limited number, how you handle payments, signage we've just mentioned, but around, if you've got a reasonable sized office, I'm sure, I think one of the ladies was from an accountant's business. I think you've probably got one-way flows and hot desks that are cleaned on a regular basis. Your common areas are handled so that they're cleaned properly and people know what they can and can't do. I'm guessing that your websites are telling people you are safe, and that your social media groups, you're telling people that you're safe to come and visit or safe to talk to, and that you've got safety at the center of everything that you're doing. I'm sure you're thinking about what PPE might be required. I'm sure also that there's been consultation with staff and a risk assessment made. I think a risk assessment is essential and needs to be proven to have been done, but consultation with staff, we're finding from some of the businesses that we work with that consultation with staff goes down pretty well. People like to be asked and have a view on these things, especially if they're worried. They want to be able to put across what they think needs to be in place for them to be less worried. And also what processes. So, the lawyer lady that's on there, there are things like document signings, maybe will signings. For those of you that are dealing with returns or payments, or, there are some things that might have contact. What's that going to do? If someone brings back an item that they want to return, what happens to that? I think it has to be stuck away somewhere for 72 hours and can't be touched. Voice of safety. I'm sure you're pretty well versed on all of that. Voice of staff. Interesting. How many staff do you have working with you? What are your staff saying? We talked to lots of businesses, we have done over the last few weeks, where they say, well, they're sort of generally saying blah, blah, blah. What are they actually saying? And we found out, the firms that have found out what their staff are saying have been just gently surprised of the vociferance of the concern that was out there. And that gives them something to work on. So if you don't know, or you think you know, but you don't actually know, it's worth finding out what needs to happen in order for people to feel that bit more confident. And as we said, the stats sort of back that up. 2/3 of people not overconfident to venture out, despite the spacing there. In one firm that we did a poll on, only 28% of that particular firms were fully confident, even if all safety measures were implemented, to go back to their offices. And we also did a number of these built together. We asked people that if they're at risk or caring for someone at risk, there could be up to about 40% of staff in that. So they need different treatment. And add on to that, if someone travels in by public transport, that might be another 10% or more, because people are concerned about coming by bus or train. So what are their concerns, and what measures do they think are important? If you know, brilliant. If you don't, it might be worth asking and finding out, and doing that in a methodical way. And I think also the staff consultation and risk assessment piece will be helped by you having that information. And as just mentioned, they like to be asked, they like to be heard, and they want to be updated in terms of what actions you're taking. And just a few other things on that. So travel arrangements we just mentioned. It's not just public transport, but who comes in by car share. So as I live up here, businesses in Croydon have got a big issue because lots of people, very few people travel in by car because parking's a nightmare. But people will travel in by public transport. That has an implication. Ongoing communications. I think Vicky was saying, there's it's absolutely critical. And I think Matthew was saying that keeping in contact with clients is absolutely important on a regular basis. But we've also seen from a staff perspective that any people that have been furloughed, have been treated differently to the way that at home, working from home staff, and there's been less communication. So there's something to make sure that there's a good balance between the two there. And is the system, if you are thinking about working a system, and let me just come to the next bullet, but some businesses have got a rota or split teams or a gradual return. Is it profitable? So when Costa opened up, Costa drive-through opened up just outside Croydon, that was quite interesting, because I've worked out that they were getting through about 10 cars in about half an hour. So it's 20 cars on an average £10. So they were probably taking £200 an hour and I could see about 4 or 5 staff in there. Does that work? Is that profitable for them? I thought to start with it probably couldn't be, but I guess they were sort of thinking, well, let's get open, and I'm sure they've got a way of working that through. So they get up to profitability, but at the start, it didn't look to me like they were probably making that much money from that. So think about it. Is the way that you're working going to be profitable in the long run, and accordingly? We've heard this phrase, agile working. What is it? Well, it's about people adapting to new roles and handling different tasks. And I think, there's this aspect of, agile working. Is it effective? And I think there's an issue here around safety as well as service. So there's one of the parts of agility, I think, is police person, as well as providing the service that they're there to do. And it's about getting communications, getting through to key people. So we're finding with a lot of businesses, because people are working from home or remotely, or they're a split team, not as easy to get through to people in the way they used to. So there's a question there as to whether that means that the customer experience is hindered in some way because they can't get through to key people. I'm sure you've come across some of these people. There are people that just don't care about the safety aspects. There are some people that don't quite understand them. And there are some people who are just a bit blasé about it. And so it doesn't really apply to them. So that enforcement piece is absolutely vital. So if you've got a policy in your team, all of your people need to know what that policy is. Enforcement is a word that we said is huge. So obviously stay calm, be polite, explain, remind. And I can't even see the final box on there. So what does it say? There we go, it's somewhere. Anyway, you can read the final box there, but it is about enforcing it as well. And so your team need to be ready to do that on a regular basis if people aren't adhering to distancing or the spacing regulations that are necessary. Wearing a mask is a huge thing at the moment, isn't it? So who's going to police people wearing a mask? It might have to be your staff, and politely explaining, you need to wear a mask in here. That's part of our policy. Would you be grateful if you could do that, please? So, voice of the safety, voice of the staff or the team, absolutely critical to making sure that there's safety, and then everyone's in place to provide a good experience. But we know that the behaviours that are displayed are the ones that your businesses will remember for. The elephant never forgets is the reason that, when we go back to what you were good at beforehand, we'll come on to that in just a moment, people will remember those things. And the aim, as it says there, is to make sure that the experience exceeds expectations and results, makes them become a long-term customer. The customer journey has to wow them so that they think, goodness, they were good. We got great value there. I enjoyed that, and I would go back. That's what this is all about, even despite all the potential restrictions that we might have at the moment. And we sort of think there is a customer journey that goes on, and there's some of you guys that I've mentioned. You got, I think, nearly all of you. It's not a sort of they look you up and come and visit and buy something and then go, or get it delivered, and then that's it. There's a longevity towards what you do. So you're going to be in regular contact with some of your clients. And Sarah, I think you were saying that your people come to see you and take advice, and then they'll book, and then there'll be other interactions that you have going forward to make sure they've got all the right information, they're ready for their trip, and probably find out afterwards what happened on that trip and how it went, etc. There's umpteen little touch points along the way, and this is where we get it right, if we get those touch points right. And here's a part, that type of map could be really useful for you if you start thinking about, well, what are those touch points, and where do we get it right, where don't we quite get it right, what's impacted by COVID restrictions at the moment, and what do we need to improve upon. And the importance of that is that we look at it from the client or the customer or the member or the patient's perspective to see what they're thinking about, the way that they interact with you. So going back a step, really, I don't know whether you're in a position to jot the odd thing down in front of you, but part of this is about making sure that what you were well known for, what made you prosperous or profitable, I know they're not possibly the best words, what were you great at before this happened? And that, I think that's a big part of making sure that if you can deliver that going forward, then you're going to continue to have a reasonable business platform. What was the experience that you delivered that made customers think, wow? It may be that you want to change that, but if that's what you want to be known for now, and then you've got to think about how we will deliver that in that new normal and make sure people know about it. So part of your exercise, maybe after this, when a quiet moment when you're watching EastEnders, is thinking, what were we great at? Are we getting that across right now? If not, how? Or are my team getting that across right now? If not, how? So I think that's a really key point that we can start thinking about. I keep talking about this customer journey and that roadmap that we've just talked about. Think about, how is it different? How is it different now compared to what it was 4 months ago? And what safety measures are getting in the way? So, a couple of key things. You're probably getting more phone and web inquiries and fewer face-to-face encounters. I know we're having loads more Zoom and Google meetings type things. We're doing this sort of thing over Zoom rather than probably face-to-face in a location much nearer to you. So that has impacts. Customer expectations of value and service are going to be there. So, and as we mentioned a bit earlier, that people have become more used to online services. So we need to make sure that when people do interact with us, they get that good feeling from that. I did mention that price might be an objection that crops up a bit more. Before all this happened, there was the statistic that I saw was that the number of people 63% of people look at the value of bigger purchases, look at the value of what they're getting, but only 14% were based on price as a high, the top feature of their decision-making process. We know that in 2008, that 14% went up to 20% on the same basis. So there's every indication that might increase this time as well. So we may need to be ready for handling price objections if that does crop up more. And we also need to maybe be ready for, in some cases, there may be less customers and there may be a spike early on for people getting out and doing things, but maybe less in the longer term. How are you going to make sure you get your share? Are you getting your message out there? Again, the lady that's in the solicitors, I can't remember who that was. It's not Ross, is it? But whoever was under the name Ross Carter.
That's Sue.
Sorry?
Sue.
It's Sue, right? Sue, yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're probably getting lots of there's lots of conveyancing activity and wills came up as a big issue early on in this. So, but there may be less corporate stuff and maybe other things, more probate probably as well. But swings and roundabouts, some things up and some things down. So where do we start? So just looking at some of the things there. Where do people's experience start with you? Is it online? And is it the information that people get in various directories or Google? Or is it by a telephone call? So think about the messages that you're giving in some of those places. And that's often the journey starts a little bit earlier than you think. We know that 80% of people look at reviews before they access a business. So what does it say in that cloud or on the computer when it says Google reviews for your business? Are you checking those out to make sure that there's a whole different conversation around dealing with those reviews? But you know, what does it say about you? And then if someone makes a phone call or drops you a info@yourbusiness.com email, what is the response like? So what is the starting point? And are you making sure that that starting point is empathetic and welcoming and interesting? You know, simple things like, there we go, before they get to you, you know, what sort of signage have you got? I've got a whole load of them there. Interestingly, you know, there's a lot of signage out there that detracts from the message of the business. So, you know, make sure there's a balance. You want to make sure people know that you're safe, but you also want people to know that you're a thriving business, you provide great services and great value, and there's a proposition as part of that. So there's a balance between some of those things on that screen there, and making sure that they know what you do. Look at the lift one there, that's interesting, isn't it? It's overwhelming, but important. On the shop floor or in your office or during your consultation, welcoming, clear, consistent, empathetic, so that people enjoy it. Empathy's huge. People seem to be saying, we want people to take things seriously. And there's this whole idea of, and again, going back to the list of people that are here, you know, you've got longevity of clients or customers. So building a rapport is really important. And that the British love small talk about the weather, but there's a massive thing here about empathy, and how are you coping with the last few months or weeks is a really interesting starting point, because it gets a conversation moving and it can highlight your empathy with their situation. We did some research around lawyer firms at the start of this and their empathetic messaging, and there was a whole load of them that had nothing. It just almost said, our offices are partially closed at the moment, call between these times. And that was a number of them. It was just bland and functional messaging with little empathy. So make sure that your messaging, whether you're talking to people or you're online, or some of your literature, has that empathy in there. And just a few tips. So as I've just mentioned, so you know, your proposition, the marketing speak, unique selling point, why you know, make sure it's still being delivered. So check it, and are you getting across what you want to get across? And this is what I think the point I was trying to make about the fact that the safety aspect has taken on a life of its own, which is important, but sometimes businesses are not quite thinking about that proposition and USP, where that's coming across. And think about it, you know, why would someone want to come and visit you? Can they come and visit you? Is there a different way of interacting with them? If not, what are you going to do? So, you know, do you need your Zoom type meetings, or can you go to them? And if you can, how do you do that in a social distancing way? It's a question to be answered. If you've got displays, you know, you need space. You probably need more space to enable distancing. We know there are loads of business out there that cram as much stock into a smaller space as possible. So that can't happen now. It has to be, stock needs to be eye-catching and interesting. But where are the pinch points, and where are people going to congregate so that there's distancing? organized. And it says below, you know, it may not be having all the stock out and other stuff out the back, just examples. And also be brutal about what sells or sometimes sell or occasionally sells. You know, this is a time if room is at a premium, then, you know, put the stuff out that sells and is profitable. What might people want now? So, you know, if we are dealing with people that want to socially distance and don't really want to go out, what are the things that they're going to want now? So, you know, if you run a boutique and you sell lots of stuff for people to go to the races, they do in Surrey here, they're particularly milliners sell lots of stuff around people going to Epsom and Ascot, and, you know, do they want that now? Clearly not. So, you know, what might be the different version of that they can make the message on. Empathy we've mentioned, staff, customers, everyone that we've talked about, and a good online presence. So that's not just website, but social media, social groups. Could you have click and collect if that's appropriate to you? We work with a high class jewelers further up in the county, and they use mini videos to demonstrate their products. When you think about it, if you're going to go and spend £10,000 on an item of jewellery, you want to inspect it pretty closely. That may not be possible, so they're doing use of mini videos to demo products, and send that to people, and then they can get close to it, and then if they like it, then they can go in and have a different demo of that and be left to look at it. And as I said, look, let people know it's still open, it's still good, safe, welcome, and there's really good empathy that comes across. And we know that you know, something like 2/3 of 3/4, sorry, of the impact that we have in the way that communicate is with body language, and only about 7 or 8% is via the words that we use. I'm sure we've all sent a text to someone that didn't quite get across the humour or irony or sarcasm that we wanted to get across, and it was taken the other way. And masks and big visors and aprons can get across again in the way of some of that body language. So again, how are our teams getting across some of those things despite some of the restrictions that are there? And as we can see, some words only can be misconstrued. And then for those of you that that either have things delivered, or there's ongoing communication, or it's a how did we do type response, you know, what happens there? And again, is there all of those things that coming across that we've just mentioned? The whole journey from sort of before the start to after the end, and these are important because it's sometimes in businesses they don't have a really good end of process, end of journey process that encourages people to come back. So it'd be interesting to see what all you guys do. So just a few final tips on that part. So payments, contactless if possible. Send receipts by email. It means you can get an email address, as it says down the bottom. If you haven't got an email customer list, and that's something that might help, then that's a way of doing that. Different opening hours we've talked about, we haven't talked about, but that might be something that's worthwhile. We're already seeing it in some of the shops near here are open certain days and open certain hours. Be ready to combat price issues, and the way, I'm sure you all know the way to do that, but it's about highlighting the value of what you do. Value is what you get for what you pay. So don't go straight to price, and don't make it a decision about price, make it a decision about value. And we always say price last. Tell them what they're going to get before you tell them about price. And it can be about the things that you can do that that maybe they can't do on a pure online system. So actual personal service, demonstrate things, try out, try on, good advice, take back, colour match, all of those things that can't be done online. Be ready to combat that. The lipstick effect came out in 2008, and what that meant was because people weren't going to buy the more expensive things, they looked at cheaper alternatives. And while not trying to be sexist, this nail bars, this is what drove nail bars. People felt they could go and have a nail treatment. It was a bit of me time, and it cost 15, 20 pounds, whereas a hairdressing appointment might have been 80, 100 pounds or even more. Not that it cost me that much. So think about, what are the cheaper alternatives? So we work with timber merchants up this part of the world, and they have a premium, a mid-range, and a budget range. And their lipstick effect is they go down to their budget range if people have a problem with price. And it's all good stuff, but possibly not finished as refined the way as other ones. Email customer lists and Facebook groups. Make sure that you're socially media connected locally. I'm sure you probably are. And just remember, is it 2 meters or 1 meter now? I'm still not quite sure. Hand sanitizing, enforce in a polite way, encourage contactless payment. I understand that Apple Pay is unlimited. I couldn't verify that, but that's what someone told me the other day. Every customer for an email address, send them receipt, gather feedback on the delivery experience. Empathy, 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 as I think I've been highlighting all the way through. Explain contactless delivery processes if that's appropriate to you, and help your staff to be safe, confident, deliver great CX customer experience. And think about the little nuances around getting your service across. So whether it be mini videos or easy, safe demonstrations that can help people see products or get into the discussions that you need to have so that you can give the advice. So just a few things, just to really finish off, looking at time, and Matthew's strict stickler for time, so let's make sure we're done in the next 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah, safety measures, hygiene factor, they must be in place. If your staff are not highly confident with them, it will show through, so it's important. So you've got to make sure that happens. And your customer journey is absolutely critical to the business starting to recover. And it says there, get it right, expertise, value, they'll be probably satisfied, means they'll come back. If business is a bit thinner on the ground, the firms that survive will be the ones that are delivering that great experience. Just a few things you can do. gov.uk, we talked about safety procedures, it's all in there. Staff, if you haven't already done so, consult with them. Tell staff what you've done, walk them through it, walk them around and make sure they know what's there. Special considerations for at-risk or carers of at-risk. And there's some mileage in an ongoing confidence checker. I'll make that very briefly in a moment. Clients, map and walk through that journey. Does it hold together? Any weak links? Are your team members prepared for it? Show real interest and empathy, as we've banged on about over the last 40 minutes or so. Stress the staff that the old normal service standards are key in the new normal. As you got there, seamless and speedy call handling, highlight what you do best, website, social media, make sure that you're using those platforms to get across some of your messages. And as I said on that infographic that we had earlier, actions, what bit that's ringed there, communicate, helpful and professional staff, keep listening to your customers is really important. And we don't want to drive people back online. So let's make sure that we give them that experience. And just a slide on us, we do lots of different things, surveys, mystery inquiries, webinars, as we're doing right now. And we've got a staff's COVID tracker, which asks people on a daily or weekly basis, how safe did you feel and why? And it's a good thing for that risk assessment piece. Oh, okay. There we go. I hope that's interesting. I hope that's given you 1 or 2 things to think about. And we are just literally on, where are we? 2 minutes to 4. So
yeah,
about in time. So that's good.
Thanks, Jim. That doesn't leave any time for questions, sadly, because we finish in 2 minutes. But if people have any questions, perhaps they could email those over to Jim. The email address is there. And we'll be back again next week looking at financial questions. So if you have any questions about getting hold of finance, how to secure finance, then Sandeep will be standing by for that. But Jim, thank you very much indeed for giving us all that information. We're going to put the recording on our website so people can absorb it and come back to it, and that will all be there for people. If you could just unshare your screen, and then we'll sign off. We've got about a minute to go. Anyone got anything very quickly? No, I think we're there. Some people are gone. So yeah, but no, Jim, thanks very much indeed. And as always, when you came to Lymington, was it earlier this year, Matt? I think that you organised that for us, and that was very helpful for local businesses there. And I'm sure Claire will be sharing with her members some of your tips over the coming weeks, and we'll do the same as well with NFBP. Jim, thank you.
Thank you.